Hello, welcome back to another PFF podcast. I'm Mike Renner, joined as always by Sam Monson, and we hit some offensive line rankings last week. We know you guys love those, some pass game rankings as well, and we're going to give you a little preview again of our rankings heading into the season. This week we have front seven rankings going up on the site tomorrow, Tuesday, July 11th, and front seven being defensive line, outside linebackers, inside linebackers, all that good stuff. The guys that play in the box, play after play. I'm going to run through them real quick, 1 through 32. I know this is always the worst part of the show, but you guys need
magic moments.
I was going to say, skip forward if you feel like it, but here we go. They're going to be on the website Tuesday if you're listening to it then. But I'm going to go starting off. Number 1, Houston Texans. 2, Seahawks. 3, Eagles. 4, Panthers. 5, Rams. 6, Vikings. 7, Broncos. 8, Cardinals. 9, Chiefs. 10, Steelers. 11, Chargers. 12, Patriots. 13, Giants. 14, Jaguars. 15, Raiders. 16, Packers. 17, Dolphins. 18, Jets. 19, Titans. 20, Falcons. 21, Ravens. 22, Bucks. 23, Bengals. 24, Browns. 25, Bills. 26, Cowboys. 27, Redskins. 28, Bears. 29, Saints. 30, Lions. 31, Colts. And 32, the San Francisco 49ers. Sam, what stands out to you
there? I like this. I think, for a start, that is clearly radio gold. No one will ever tell me different. You reading out a list of 32 teams.
Tell them how much you love this, and leave us a review.
It's money. But the other thing about this is, to offset that, we give people a nice little reason to listen to the podcast. You get an early sneak peek of our rankings. You get it a day before anyone else is going to get it on the website. I think the obvious thing that leaps out from that is the Houston Texans jumping all the way up to number 1. I mean, it makes sense when you consider that this is a team that had a pretty formidable defensive front last year, and they're adding a legit J.J. Watt back to it, who is the best player in the NFL. So that, I mean, it makes sense when you look at it that way, but it's a long way to jump. It puts them above some extremely dominant defensive fronts, and it kind of makes you wonder just how special this Texans front could be.
Yeah, that's what really jumped out to me too, and I really couldn't argue with it with how much success they had last year. But how good do you think this front seven can be? So they have J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, Whitney Merciless, either DJ Reader or Carlos Watkins there is their front 4. Behind them you have Brian Cushing, Bernardrick McKinney, also Zach Cunningham now, the second-round pick this year. Could this be the number 1 team? We have them ranked number 1. Is that realistic to think just bringing back J.J. Watt boosts them up this much?
Yeah, I think it easily could. I think the key question is, how are all those pieces going to fit together at the same time? You know, a couple of years ago, we wondered how the Jets were going to kind of shoehorn a lot of vaguely similar players into a defensive front and have it function. I think there is a concern that could happen to the Texans. J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney are effectively the same player in terms of style, in terms of how they play, in terms of where they align, in terms of where you want to deploy them on a defensive line. And I think they're both more edge rusher than they are interior player. Whitney Merciless is a pure edge rusher. So that that gives you 3 guys that you essentially want to deploy on the edge. Obviously, there's only 2 spaces for that to happen. You're going to have to deploy at least one of them inside. You're going to have to really deploy 2 of them consistently inside if you're planning on having, somebody like Brennan Scarlett take the other outside linebacker spot that
John Simon.
There you go. John Simon was operating in last year. So I don't see a reason it won't work. Certainly Clowney and J.J. Watt are both capable of playing in and outside. They're both capable of doing it independently. They're both capable of doing it together. I think it's just a case of seeing how that kind of thing gels and trying to craft it consistently in a formation that's actually going to produce the most amount of pressure.
Yeah, on third downs, it's really not an issue whatsoever. It's almost helpful to have the guys like Clowney and Watt that can kind of kick inside a little bit and play on the edge. You don't really know where they're going to be lining up. So I think on third downs, it's only going to help them. But like you said, early downs, first down, you're in a base package. I am interested to see where they line up. I think J.J. Watt is the guy I'd kick inside to 3 tech or 2, wherever, playing him over a guard, he would definitely be the one I would say needs to play there. But they kind of do have 3 guys that would ideally be playing a very similar role along that front 4. So that will be interesting to see. But do you think this defense? So I've been saying for years, past 2 years at least, that they have all the pieces there. I would have loved to have seen them go one more in the draft, defensive line, and then you go from, a very good, dominant defensive line to that Broncos 2015 level where literally it doesn't matter what offense you're going up against. They're not going to be able to block you on a third down. You're getting pressure on the quarterback down after down. I wish they would have done it, but do you think even with those 3 guys they have there now, they can be that sort of defense?
I think a lot rests on the shoulders of Jadeveon Clowney. He's been hailed as this freak athlete, freak pass rusher, a guy that was going to come in and dominate the league because he's been hyped that way since high school. And he hasn't quite become that player. I think he's taken steps in the right direction. He's become an extremely good run defender. We saw late in the season and heading into the playoffs just how good he could be. He's capable of having those kind of games where he takes over and becomes, one of the biggest factors in the game. JJ Watt basically does that every single week. So it's not enough to just flash the ability to do it. If you're going to become that Denver Broncos 2015 level of defense, you need to have a couple of guys that'll do that multiple times in a season. It can't just be JJ Watt every single week. So if Clowney can kind of build on what he did this season, start 2017 the way he finished 2016, including the postseason, then I think they're in real business. Whitney Merciless has quietly become just a he's become every bit the first round pick he was supposed to be, and they'd kind of given up on, which is why they were taking Clowney in the first place. So he'll get you a consistent level of pressure. JJ Watt will be JJ Watt. And then it really comes down to what Clowney can add to that, because that's the missing kind of piece in that puzzle that they haven't had in the past.
The Jadeveon Clowney thing is really interesting to me because he went from, I think, being underrated in terms of everyone was calling him a bust those first 2 years because of the injury issues. But when he was on the field, he was playing at still a high level, to then I think overrated when he made the Pro Bowl last year when he still hadn't developed into a complete pass rusher. He still really just has an inside move and a bull rush, hasn't been able to, from what I've seen, consistently win to the outside of offensive tackles, and that's really hindered his, ability to win as a pass rusher. And I think his grade bore that out for us. He wasn't one of, the top 20 graded edge rushers in terms of pass rushing. He's just not that level quite yet, but he's still, still a good player. But I don't think he's at a Pro Bowl level yet. So if he can continue that upward trajectory that we sort of seen him on, yeah, this D-line is immediately scary, probably a number 1 unit, and so. That to me is going to be the biggest thing for them. I'm just sad we didn't get to see J.J. Watt with that defense last year is my biggest thing. I wish just how good that defense could have been with how good their secondary was with A.J. Boye becoming a true number 1 cornerback. That defense could have almost, I don't want to say carried them to a Super Bowl because the offense was so bad, but it could have given the Patriots a better game, I thought.
Yeah, and I think the limitations you mentioned about Clowney is why we've seen them move him more inside than in previous years. There wasn't really any serious consideration of him being more of an interior player very early in his career, who's just an edge guy. Now I think they're moving him. They're almost doing the reverse of what they did with J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt was so just fundamentally dominant as a pass rusher with speed that it made sense to just move him outside and outside until he was an edge rusher, which he basically is. He's more of an edge rusher now than he is an interior guy. I think Clowney's going to go in the other direction, but kind of end up in the same place where, there's more limitations with Clowney, so we're going to move him inside and let his natural athleticism win against guards, as opposed to out on an island against tackles when he doesn't really have that speed move. But you're going to kind of end up with the same sort of split where you can play both those guys outside a fair bit. They both moonlight inside and just absolutely terrorize interior guys when they are put in there.
So we've talked about the Texans and what they're going to do along that defensive line in terms of alignment. They were one of our most improved teams from our end of year 2016 rankings. They went from number 10 to number 1. The team that moved up the most spots in our rankings, the Jacksonville Jaguars, from 26 to number 14. They have the exact same problem on their hands in terms of where are they going to put all these guys, because they've added Calais Campbell. They had Malik Jackson, and those two play almost the exact same spot. At least they did a season ago. What is Jacksonville going to do that you think warrants this jump to 14? Because I think it is warranted, but what are they going to do with those two guys in terms of deployment to be effective and, generate pressure when they really could not a season ago?
Yeah, it's interesting. And they also have Sheldon Day, who I think can be a very effective player in exactly that same role as well. So potentially you've got three guys whose best position is exactly the same spot along the defensive line, which is that three technique, pass rushing defensive tackle, the guy that's on the outside of a guard, goes through that B gap there. All three of those guys, I think, in an ideal world, that's where they want to rush from. Campbell, I think, has at least shown, or has at least been deployed in more areas than Malik Jackson. Malik Jackson was basically, that's the only place he lined up. That was where he was every single down. Calais Campbell has at least moved around the defensive line a little bit. He played three tech more than anywhere else, but he was still deployed, inside as a nose tackle sometimes. He was deployed a little bit all over the place. So, when you consider this Jacksonville defense, they're basically running that Seahawks shifted defensive front. So you kind of have to think about it in terms of Seahawks defenders, what these guys are going to look like. It makes sense to me to deploy Calais Campbell as your nose tackle in that defense, at least on early downs. He would be the guy I think that's most capable of holding up there. You can use a legitimate nose tackle and play one of those guys at defensive end, which is actually what I've heard they're probably going to do. I think they'd be better off using Calais Campbell as the nose tackle on those early downs, using Malik Jackson as your three tech consistently, then your edge guys, are someone like, obviously Dante Fowler is going to be one of them. And then you kind of platoon, I think, the other spot depending on what the down and distance is.
I am going to have a little different take. I think just because of how weak their edge guys are and how much Yannick Ngakoue was our lowest graded edge defender against the run a season ago, basically you don't want him on the field on early downs. He's a fine, sort of third down option and could develop into an even better one, but I don't want him seeing the field on basically any sort of rundown because he just got his butt handed to him. I remember the Titans game last year where the Titans ran all over them. He was getting owned by tight ends. John Carlson was just moving him all over. Oh, excuse me, Anthony Fasano. I'm getting my Notre Dame tight ends mixed up. Anthony Fasano was just owning him all day long. One of the best tight end block performances I've ever seen, but it was because Yannick Ngakoue basically could not hold up in the running game. So I'm going to have a little different take. I want to see. I'm fine with Calais Campbell at the nose tackle, but then I think I want to see Sheldon Day get some playing time on the field at the three technique, and then I think Malik Jackson can play the base end role. I think I want him out there more than I want someone like Campbell, and then Fowler on the other side. He's fine enough to play the run on early downs, even though he hasn't really shown the top five potential. He's still probably the guy I want there out playing against the run.
See, I think if you're going to do that, you would almost prefer Calais Campbell out there than Malik Jackson. He's the one guy I don't think I would move because he just hasn't done a huge amount of moving around before. He's been in the same spot year after year, whether it's Denver or Jacksonville. Campbell, at least, can move around a little bit. And he has, he came out as basically a 4-3 end, albeit a massively oversized one. So if you're going to do that, I think Calais Campbell could play end on those rundowns, and then you kick him inside and rush with those kind of three techniques rather. On pass rushing downs, you basically have the same guy on either side of the line and just have a wider middle that you're having the linebackers prop up.
They could also obviously throw in Abry Jones. They probably will to some degree at nose, who's a competent run defender on early downs. But like I said, I want to see Sheldon Day get more play because what we've seen from him in college and as a rookie, I think he could develop into that. If you deploy those four together, you can have pass rush, a very talented pass rush on early downs and late downs as well. So we'll see how they work that out. They went from 26 to 14 in our rankings, like I said. I think they could be even better than that just from the young talent they have there with someone like, Miles Jack at linebacker. If Dante Fowler, does return, if he was hampered by injury still last year and returns fully healthy this year, could get even better this year. We'll see about that. Let's go to the other side of the coin, though, and look at the teams that took the biggest drop from 2016 end-of-year rankings to our preseason 2017. And really no one took huge free falls on our list. No one really lost, a good deal of players. The team that took the biggest drop on our list actually is the Green Bay Packers, who went from 9 to 16. And the only guy they lost was Julius Peppers a season ago. What do you think the Packers' defensive front will look like in 2017?
Yeah, and I don't know if you meant it to sound that way, but kind of only losing Julius Peppers thing, I think, is a pretty significant loss.
Well, I said it because he, just from a snap perspective, was not, he was a part-time player at this point. It wasn't like losing, I don't know. It wasn't like losing Von Miller or something.
Yeah, and it was their one defensive loss, I guess, which is, I wasn't sure whether that was the way you meant it or not. But my point is that I think when the Packers moved him to this situational role, it made him better. So he may have been playing fewer snaps for them. He may not have been an every down player anymore, but I think he was a better player because of it. They allowed him to stay fresh and to focus on being just a dominant force when he was out there. And it'll be interesting to see him this year back in Carolina if they plan on putting him back full time, whether that's going to have a corresponding drop off now that he has to be an every down player again. But I think that is a big loss for them, losing a guy that was playing that well. What made them, I think, so good last year is you had Nick Perry finally showing that first round potential that he's had, and Julius Peppers on the other side also bringing some heat as that situational guy. And you had those two guys playing really well on the edge, with obviously Mike Daniels being a consistent performer up the middle. And then you just kind of needed bit part players to fit in around those guys. But you take Peppers out of that, and you really only have Mike Daniels and Nick Perry, and Nick Perry's only really done it for 1 year. There's a lot of question marks there all of a sudden.
I am surprised that the Packers let Dayton Jones go over to the Minnesota Vikings, their former first-round pick. Not because he was, this amazing, not because he had shown that he was, worthy of that first-round pick. He was fine. He was, in our grading system, was always slightly above average. But because I thought he played the exact same, I thought his best role was basically what Julius Peppers did for them last year. And then they let both walk. And now they really don't have a guy who makes sense in that role anymore, I don't think. Maybe Dean Lowry. But I just think that this front seven really lost some luster when they let both of those guys go. I like Nick Perry, I like Mike Daniels, but after that, if Kenny Clark doesn't take a monstrous step forward from his rookie year to his second year in the league, there's really not too much to get excited about here.
Yeah, there really is a lot of questions there and a lot of unproven talent, a lot of guys that need to step up for this unit to be anything like it was a year ago. So, like I say, they've only really lost one guy, but they didn't get better, I think, which is, or at least on paper, unless these guys do take significant steps forward, they didn't get better. And as we said just before you came on the podcast, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse because everyone else is trying to get better every single offseason. Let's
touch on one more thing, Packers-wise, and it's what the heck has happened to Clay Matthews. I get that he spent 2 years basically at inside linebacker, a year and a half, whatever, but he is not even close to the same pass rusher we saw back in 2010. And it's not like he's that old. Like, he should not be declining, but he was he graded out below average for us a season ago as a pass rusher, which seems sort of unthinkable early on in his career that he would ever get to this point. Only 31 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he 31 years old. Yeah, so he would have been relatively old when he came in because he would have been a senior, right?
Yeah, I think he was a fifth-year senior too, coming out.
Yeah, so he had a bit of age to him. I guess he strikes me as the kind of guy that may have been worn down through just attrition for quite a while because he was never the biggest edge rusher in the world. Those 2 seasons, I think, at inside linebacker probably didn't do him any favors either. And then he just doesn't have it anymore. He doesn't have that reckless explosion and athleticism that he used to. And I guess it's early to be declining like that, but it's not unheard of, especially for a guy that's played a lot of football, full college career and all that kind of stuff.
Still, very odd to me. We'll see if he has any sort of bounce back year here in 2017. I want to touch on one more team that declined. In my opinion, they didn't decline too much in our rankings. They went from 5th at the end of year last year to 8th right now. That's the Arizona Cardinals. To me, they had by far the biggest single loss of anyone this offseason in terms of front seven, and it was Calais Campbell. really you don't see a lot of times front seven players that, that big of a name move. It's there's about one or two in off season, it seems like, and this year it was one, and it's Calais Campbell. And I just think that they don't really. I get that they drafted Robert Nkemdiche to play a very similar role, but I don't think that's going to be enough to replace what he brought to the table for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the single biggest loss in a front seven over the course of the offseason. So it's a huge potential hole. I guess when you look at it on paper, they still have quite a lot of talent in that front seven. Actually, more than I would have thought before I was sort of looking through it. Marcus Golden, I think, is a really underrated guy, and a guy that's taking steps towards being an extremely top pass rusher, or top edge defender anyway. They kept Chandler Jones, which was one guy they had the potential to lose in the offseason. Those guys at linebacker have potential. Deion Buchanan gets a lot of press for being that kind of converted safety. He's an okay linebacker. I don't think he's an amazing linebacker. He's a more interesting story than he is good player, if you get me. But I think Hassan Reddick is a really interesting guy they've added to that group that could make a real impact there. And then a lot is riding on Nkemdiche. If he can be anything like that kind of interior disruptive force, certainly as a pass rusher, I don't think they're going to rely on him to be anything like the run defender that Calais Campbell was. But if he can just get penetration and pressure and disrupt the middle and passing downs, then I think they should still be okay.
I just think that they'll miss, just everyone in that front will miss Calais Campbell more than maybe just the loss of the grade shows, because of one, they the second most blitz heavy team in the NFL a season ago. That's not going to change anytime soon with the philosophy there in Arizona. Blitzed on over 40% of opposing offensive snaps. They ended up with the highest pressure rate in the NFL a season ago, largely due because of the, like I said, the blitz rate. That helps you generate more pressure. But they also, like you said, Chandler Jones, Marcus Golden, they had a lot of talented pass rushers, but they also stunted more than any team in the NFL last year. Were extremely effective with those, and that's, I think, where they're going to miss Calais Campbell. He was a wrecking ball on on that first edge of a stunt or looping around the edge. He was fantastic at getting home on stunts, and his ability to line up anywhere along that defensive line, like we've mentioned already in the Jags talk. I just think that was so invaluable to what they did. All of a sudden, you don't have that guy. And Nkemdiche's sort of, he's very athletic, but it takes more than just athleticism to execute a stunt correctly. I just think it'll impact more than just Calais Campbell. Guys like Marcus Golden, guys like Chandler Jones, who were effective on those stunts, just won't have the same amount of space to work with without Calais Campbell in there.
Yeah, I can't argue with any of that. I think they could easily have a bigger decline than we have them pegged for so far.
Good. We're on the same page. All right, let's move on. Keep it moving to sort of our opinion part of this. These are, like we've mentioned before, these are our party line rankings. We have to come to some sort of agreement to get to these 32. They're not our individual opinions. So, Sam, in your opinion, which team on this list is too high? And if you forgot the list, go back and listen to the beginning. I listed all 32. Go ahead and do that. We'll be back. Yeah, Sam, go ahead. Which team was too high?
So we have the Minnesota Vikings up at 6, and I just don't think that defensive front is that good. I think it could have been, but the loss or kind of position in limbo of Sharif Floyd, I think, has absolutely torpedoed that front seven in terms of their ability to dominate. Linval Joseph is this incredibly destructive nose tackle. Sharif Floyd at his best is a fantastic pass rushing 3-tech, but without him, they don't really have one of those. They have Tom Johnson, who is a good sub package rushing guy, but you don't want to be the number one 3-tech in your team. Everson Griffin, I think, is a good defensive end, but I don't think he's ever going to be any better than that. Danielle Hunter gets a lot of press for being the next breakout candidate. And he definitely has a chance to be that. I think he's still only 20, I think that's right. Not going to be 23 till October or something, and he's racked up a huge amount of sacks. I kind of have the feeling that he is going to plateau, though, instead of just continually getting better. It seems to go against everybody's expectations for him, but I don't think he's played as well. I don't think he's pass rushed as well as the sack totals have suggested. I think he's a really good run defender. I just don't know that a guy like that tends to progress in a consistent arc until he's, all world level. I just think he's going to hit this level where that's kind of who he is, which is, again, a good player, not a great one. Anthony Barr took this crazy step back last year for reasons I don't think anybody understands. And the other linebackers, I think, are just okay. They're not great. I just don't see where this unit as a group is going to become dominant.
The thing is, though, really no holes on this roster.
Sure.
In the front seven, excuse me. 3 tech is a little bit of a hole.
One linebacker spot.
And then obviously base linebacker, which is not a huge. That's everyone seems to have a hole there. And then I just think that they're all young, like you mentioned. Danielle Hunter, 22. Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, still on their rookie contracts, could legitimately be improving still. Anthony Barr, I think last year was an aberration, obviously, compared to what we've seen from him in his career. It looked very much.
Do you have an explanation for that? Because I never came up with
zero explanation. So, I mean, Mike Zimmer didn't have an explanation when they asked him. So,
no.
If he doesn't have one, I don't know how I'm supposed to have
one. Even
if
he did, he wouldn't tell us.
At
least you might tell us if you had one.
Yeah. But I do think that there's enough, like you said, young, talented to warrant number 6. They could even outperform that. So calling them over at too high at this point, I can see it based purely off of maybe what they did a season ago, but I still think it's a top 10 unit and could legitimately, like I said, be better than number 6 ranking when it's all said and done.
Who you got as your overrated one then?
I said, and this one hurts because I loved this team in 2015. I was pushing them from week 1 in terms of this being a different unit, and it's the Denver Broncos. I think they've just lost too much from that 2015. People still think that they're that team, and they're really not. They especially got hurt in their run defense a season ago. They had the fewest amount of stops in the run game that went for 0 or negative yards of any team in the NFL. They were like 10% below the league average even. They were awful. Their run defense was just not good a season ago. And they're still extremely blitz heavy, but outside of Von Miller, there's really no one that is dominant again. They don't have a dominant force along that front, whereas they had 2 back in 2015 with Malik Jackson and DeMarcus Ware when everyone was healthy. So they lost 2 of those type of players. Now you really only have – I get that Shaq Barrett and Shane Ray are talented edge rushers in their own right, but after that, it's pretty barren. And I think – calling them a top 10 unit here, we had them at number 7, I believe. That's just too high for me.
Clearly, you're forgetting about the biggest addition of the offseason.
Dominic Pecco. Oh, my bad.
There you go. At nose tackle. That's all your problems.
I was going to say, that actually is helping my point out. They're like, if he sees the field, they go even lower. So
not just sees the field. He's their starting nose tackle. That's it all fixed.
Him and Jared Crick might. I hope they're not listening, might be the worst players at their respective positions in the NFL. So
they have got to hope that Adam Gotsis actually shows ability in year 2.
Yes.
Because he needs to be starting quickly, otherwise they have issues.
7th just seems too high. That's all. That's all I'm saying. All
right. I can go with that. You made a good case.
All right. What's flip side of the coin? Too low. Who do you think we underrated on this list?
I am going to go. I can't back it up on paper, right? But I would bet money that the San Francisco 49ers will not be the bottom ranked front 7 rankings when we do this after the season. There's too much talent in that front 7. They've added too many good players over the past couple of years. A couple of them will play well over the course of the year, and that'll be enough to drag them up. I really, really liked Solomon Thomas at Stanford the past couple of years. He's just incredibly disruptive. DeForest Buckner is the same kind of player. Is incredibly disruptive in himself.
We're talking about they got the Jags problem again. 3 of the same player.
But again, I think they're moving to that same kind of defense. So so it's not quite as bad as it looked on paper before the last season if they were doing it where you literally would have 3 into 2. At least this way, there's kind of potential for them to figure it out somehow. But it is. I mean, that's really tricky. Those 3 guys should be in the same spot, essentially. But I think with Thomas, with DeForest Buckner, and Eric Armstead being the other guy, they've added Elvis Dumerville, who has still got some fumes in the tank as a pass rusher. Navarro Bowman is obviously incredibly talented, whether he'll get back to anything like the play we've seen from him in the past. I just think there's enough talent in that group that we're going to see something better than the bottom ranked team in the NFL.
Man, they really, though, Armstead, Buckner, some of those guys along that front could not hold up to the run at all a season ago.
No, yeah, they still need
they still have some serious issues in terms of run defense. I want to know also what happened to Aaron Lynch a season ago. He looked, back in 2015, looked like he was going to be a legit pass rushing threat. His pro career has sort of mirrored his college career, where he started off in Notre Dame, looked as a freshman, broke their sack record, and then all of a sudden went nowhere. And that's the same thing that seems like what happened to Aaron Lynch last year.
Also, I completely forgot about Reuben Foster.
And Reuben Foster, who might not see the field this year,
might not, but if he does, he could have the kind of impact who on his own could drag them higher than 32nd.
I can get on board with them being too low. Just in terms of who I would take, which front seven I would rather have. Not saying they don't deserve to be there just based off of past performance, but if I had to take one, I would probably take them over definitely the three teams in front of them at the moment. So, if you don't remember them, go back to the beginning. I listed them all out. All right, my team that I thought was too low, we already touched on actually. I thought the Jaguars, even at 14, that jump up to 14, I still think it's too low. I think this linebacking core is fantastic, has potential to be one of the best in the NFL with Telvin Smith, how we've seen him improve every single year, Paul Posluszny, and Miles Jack, I still believe, even if he didn't see the field much as a rookie, can be a sort of Swiss Army knife in that defense. They can stay in a base package longer than most teams can with what he can do. So I'm a fan of what they did. I think if they just find that right balance along that front four, that this is a top 10 type of, just adding a fourth the level of Calais Campbell will just make everyone else look better. Like I said, I think he made everyone else look better in Arizona with what he did. I think he can do the same in Jacksonville.
There's no way Paul Posluszny has that season again though. Like,
fair enough.
He had a PFF grade of 88.4 last year, which is a height that he's hit before. He's had three other comparable seasons, but not since 2011. His past four seasons went 45.0, 49.6, 53.3, 44.6, and then he jumped up like 40 points to 88.4 in one of the most, where the hell did that come from, seasons of anybody in 2016. So, I mean, I think there's a much better chance that Paul Posluszny will suck in 2017 than he's really good.
We shall see. All right, let's keep it moving to the last segment here. We gave you the PFF Party Line Top 5, which Houston Texans, Seattle Seahawks, Philadelphia Eagles, Carolina Panthers, Los Angeles Rams. Sam, what would your top 5 be right now if you had to give yours? Give yours?
I do agree with the top 3 as we have it. I think Houston, we talked about them. I think Seattle is the kind of the gold standard of defensive fronts and has been for a while. I think they still belong up there. I really like what Philadelphia have put together. Even if you factor in the idea that Brandon Graham will probably regress a little bit from last year, I think they can kind of offset that by having drafted Derek Barnett, who I'm a big fan of. I think when you add in, they've also situational guys like Vinny Curry, Chris Long. They had a Timmy Jernigan. I think there's a lot of depth on that defensive line. So I really like them. I think, I actually do think that Denver is still a top 5 unit. I know you've been against them. I just think there's enough there still. Having said that, that was before the Domotap Pico thing. I might be readjusting that now that I've remembered he's on the field. And the other team I think that belongs up there, and I hate this because they still have no linebackers and it pains me, but the Giants defensive front is just so ridiculously good. And interesting. I'm kind of co-opting Landon Collins into the front 7 because he plays so much in the box and so much around the line of scrimmage. That
honestly, box safeties are more,
he's more a front 7 player.
Should be more involved in these rankings than like a base linebacker.
Exactly. He's more a front 7 player than a 2-down linebacker that's not going to see the field the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So I think the Giants are that awesome up front.
That's interesting. I like the Giants. I like them more than where we had them at 13th. But top 5, I'm not getting on board with. Here's how mine went. I went 1 Texans, 2 Eagles. I'm a huge fan of what they have along that defensive front because they go 5 deep. with the addition of Derek Barnett, and then Vinny Curry, one of the better situational pass rushers in sub packages in the NFL. And then I love their linebackers, Jordan Hicks, Nigel Bradham. I think they're good enough, and Michael Kendricks as well. So Eagles at 2, Seahawks 3. 4, I think the Kansas City Chiefs have the potential to be a top 5 defensive front in the NFL.
Oh.
When you factor in, my boy, when you factor in the fact that Chris Jones, what he did the second half of last season, if he can continue on that upward trajectory, which I know he can, if he becomes sort of that, Fletcher Cox level of play, Mike Daniels, that elite, maybe not it's not Aaron Donald, but that second tier level of play, I think that this defensive front, adding Beanie Logan, getting Justin Houston back healthy, all of a sudden you have a handful of playmakers in that defense. I think that front seven is a top 5 front seven. And then I'll put the Rams at number 5 just because Robert Quinn, Aaron Donald, Michael Brockers, that's just a top 5 unit to me. That D-line is
the Chiefs thing is interesting because it was all talk about losing Dontari Poe. They may have upgraded going to Logan and nose tackle. Like, for a guy that just all he's supposed to do there is be a nose tackle.
Defense? Yeah.
He's not going to have pretensions to do anything else. He's a nose tackle. He knows what he is. He's good at that. He might be a better pure nose tackle than Poe is.
It's a hot take, Sam. Actually, it's not really, but I'm on board with that take. The more hot takes, the better.
Well, that's a kind of that's something that's gone completely under the radar. Everyone thinks of Dontari Poe as a big departure for the Chiefs, but if you look at it on paper, they may actually be better at that spot now that they've lost him.
No, he was so burned out. He just was not effective down in, down out like you want a nose tackle to be, just because he played too much over the course of his career. You can't, at 350 pounds, be effective playing every snap of every game. So no surprise there. All right, there you have it. There's our front 7 rankings, which we might tweak next year, make them front 6 or maybe front 6 and a box safety. I don't know.
6.5.
6.5. We'll see, but that's our front 7 rankings. Make sure to go check them out. It'll be on the website tomorrow. And make sure to go to iTunes. Leave us a 5-star review. Every week we'll be picking out one lucky person if you leave your Twitter handle or an email address to get a elite membership. That's a $200 value, yours for free if you leave us a 5-star review and we select you. We'll be doing that every week up until the season. So go ahead, do that. Like I said, create more new accounts. I'll give you the best chance of getting that membership if you just keep creating them, keep leaving 5-star reviews. Odds are you'll probably get one at one point. We'll be back next week doing some more rankings. The late week podcast, Sam, what do we got up on the docket? We did running game last week. We got passing going this week?
I think we're probably going to go into passing. It's going to depend whether we get the okay from Steve to talk quarterbacks without him.
Yeah, that's a very good question. All right, so we'll be here on the Late Week podcast going over how we grade once again. Make sure to check out the previous ones to see how we grade the run game and just overall grading in general. And that's it for us. We'll be back next week. Have a good one.